Hello, welcome to AimSMR. Today I'm going to be reading a story. This is a story from a collection of Japanese fairy tales translated and arranged by Yae Theodora Ozaki. It was in 1908. I have taken the liberty of rewriting bits and pieces to make it more understandable and flow a little bit better. I hope everyone enjoys it. It's titled My Lord Bag of Rice. Long, long ago in Japan, there lived a courageous warrior recognized to all as Tawara Toda, or My Lord Bag of Rice. His actual name changed from Fujiwara Hidesato, and here is the very thrilling tale of how he came to change his name. One day he sallied forth in search of adventures, for he had the nature of a warrior and could not bear to be idle. So he buckled on his two swords, took his large bow, much taller than himself, in his hand, and slinging his quiver on his back, began out. He had not gone a very long distance before he reached the bridge of Seto no Karashi, spanning the length of the beautiful Lake Biwa. As soon as he stepped onto the bridge, he realized he wasn't just on a bridge, but a huge serpent dragon. Its body was so large that it appeared like a trunk of a huge pine tree, and it took up the entire width of the bridge. One of its large claws rested on the parapet of one aspect of the bridge, and its tail took up the length of the rest of it. The monster seemed to be asleep, and when it breathed, fire and smoke sprouted from its nostrils. At first, Hidesato could not help feeling alarmed by the sight of this horrible reptile mendacity in his route. He felt as though he should turn and run, but also like he should stroll right over its frame. He turned into a brave man, however, and putting aside all fear, went forward dauntlessly. Crunch, crunch. He now stepped on the dragon's body, then among his coils, and without even a backward glance, went on his manner. He was most effective in these long steps, until he heard someone calling behind him. He turned around, and was amazed to see that the monster dragon had vanished, and was replaced with an ordinary hunter, who was bowing most ceremoniously to the floor. His red hair streamed over his shoulders. He wore a crown in the shape of a dragon's head, and his clothes became patterned with shells. Hidesato knew that this was no everyday mortal, and questioned the peculiar incidents. Where had the dragon gone so suddenly? Or had it converted itself into this man? And what did all this mean? With his mind racing, his attention was called away as the person addressed him. "Was it you who called me just now?" "Yes, it was I," responded the man. "I have an earnest request to ask of you. Do you believe you can help me with my request?" "If it is within my power to accomplish it, I will," spoke Hidesato. "But first, inform me who you are." "I am the Dragon King of the lake, and my home is in these waters, simply under this bridge." "And what is it you ask of me?" questioned Hidesato. "I need you to kill my mortal enemy, the centipede, who lives in the mountain beyond." The Dragon King pointed to a gigantic peak on the other shore of the lake. "I have lived now for many years in this lake, and I have a big family of children and grandchildren. For a long time we've lived in terror, for a monstrous centipede has found our home. Night after night it comes and captures one of my relatives. I'm powerless to stop it. If it continues on like this, it will take all of my relatives until I'm the only one left. Then it will take me. I am consequently very unhappy, and in my extreme need, I decided to ask help from a human being. I have waited many days on the bridge with this goal, in the shape of the horrible serpent dragon, with the hope that a strong, courageous soul would come alongside. However, every person who saw me has turned and ran away as fast as they could. You are the first person I have seen that was capable of gazing upon me without fear, so I knew immediately you were a person of outstanding braveness. I beg you have pity on me. Will you please help me and kill my enemy, the centipede?" Hidesato felt very sorry for the Dragon King after listening to his story, and with no trouble, promised to do what he could to help him. The warrior asked where the centipede lived, so he could assault the creature without delay. The Dragon King replied that its home was inside Mount Mikami, but as it arrived to the palace of the lake at the same time every night, it would be better to wait until then. So the Dragon King led Hidesato to his palace beneath the bridge. The waters parted before the Dragon King, allowing both of them to go deep into the water. Strangely, neither of them got wet. Never had Hidesato seen anything so stunning as this palace of white marble below the lake. He had heard of the Sea King's palace at the bottom of the sea, where all the servants were saltwater fishes, but he was astonished to find it here, within the heart of Lake Biwa. The dainty goldfishes, purple carp, and silvery trout waited upon the Dragon King and his guest. Hidesato was amazed at the feast that unfolded for him. The dishes had been crystallized lotus leaves and plant life, and the chopsticks had been of the rarest ebony. As soon as they sat down, the sliding doorways opened, and 10 lovable goldfish dancers swam out, and behind them were 10 crimson carp musicians with the koto and the samisen. The hours flew by until nighttime, and the stunning music and dancing had banished all thoughts of the centipede. The Dragon King was about to toast to the warrior with a sparkling goblet of wine, when the palace started shaking from a tramp, tramp, as if a military had started to march close by. Hidesato and his host both rose to their feet and rushed to the balcony. On the opposite mountain, the warrior saw great glowing fireballs coming nearer and nearer. The Dragon King stood by his side, trembling with worry. The centipede, those 2 fireballs are its eyes. It's coming for its prey. Now is the time to kill it. Hidesato looked where his host pointed, and in the dim light of the starlit nighttime, behind the fireball eyes, he saw the lengthy frame of a monstrous centipede winding round the mountains. He could see its 100 feet glowing like lanterns moving in the direction of the shore. Hidesato showed not the least sign of fear. He tried to calm the Dragon King. "Do not be afraid. I shall vanquish the centipede. Just hand me my bow and arrows." The Dragon King did as asked, and the warrior noticed he only had 3 arrows left in his quiver. He took the bow, and fitting an arrow to the notch, took cautious intention, then let it fly. The arrow hit the centipede dead center in its head, but instead of penetrating, it bounced off and onto the ground. Undaunted, Hidesato took another arrow, fitted it into the notch of the bow, and let it fly. Again the arrow hit its mark. Again it failed. The centipede was impervious to projectiles. When the Dragon King saw that even this courageous warrior's arrows had been powerless against the centipede, his heart became weak, and he began to tremble with worry. The warrior had only 1 arrow left in his quiver, and if this one failed, he couldn't kill the centipede. He looked throughout the waters. The massive centipede had wound its horrid body 7 times round the mountain, and would soon come right down to the lake. Nearer and nearer gleamed the fireball eyes. The mile of its 100 feet started to throw reflections on the still surface of the lake. Suddenly, the warrior remembered that he had heard human saliva was lethal to centipedes. But this was no normal centipede. This was one so vast that to even think about would make someone creep with horror. Hidesato was determined to make his last arrow the end of this nightmare. He took his final arrow, sucked on the tip until it was dripping with saliva, then fitted it into the notch, and let his last arrow fly. This time the arrow hit its mark again, but it did not rebound. It penetrated the beast's mind. Then, with a convulsive shudder, the serpentine body stopped moving. The great glowing fireball eyes and the mile of feet darkened to a glare like the sundown of a stormy day, after which went out into blackness. An outstanding darkness now spread over the heavens. The thunder rolled, the lightning flashed, the wind roared in fury, and it seemed as though the battle was over. The Dragon King and his children and servants all crouched in hidden parts of the palace, afraid for their lives, for the palace had been shaken to its foundation. Finally, the dreadful night was over. Daylight dawned, stunning and clear. The centipede was gone from the mountain. Hidesato called to the Dragon King to come to the balcony with him, as the centipede was now useless, and there was no longer need to worry. The entire kingdom emerged to witness the defeat of their foe, joyful as Hidesato pointed to the lake where the lifeless carcass of the centipede floated, tinging the water pink from its blood. The gratitude of the Dragon King knew no bounds. The whole circle of relatives came and bowed before the warrior, calling him their preserver and the bravest warrior in all Japan. Another ceremonial dinner followed, more sumptuous even than the first. All varieties of fish, prepared in every conceivable way, raw, stewed, boiled, and roasted, served in coral trays and crystal dishes, were placed before him, and the most exquisite wine Hidesato had ever tasted in his existence. To add to the beauty of everything, the sun shone brightly, and the lake glittered like a liquid diamond, and the palace was 1,000 times more lovely in the day than it was at night. His host attempted to persuade him to stay a little while, however. Hidesato insisted on going home, saying he had finished what he had come to do, and must go back. The Dragon King and his family were all very sorry to see Hidesato go so soon, but since he was leaving, convinced him to accept a few gifts in token of their gratitude. As the warrior stood on the balcony, ready to depart, a train of fish abruptly transformed into the king's advisors, each dressed in ceremonial gowns with dragon crowns on their heads. The presents they carried were these. First, a big bronze bell. Second, a bag of rice. Third, a roll of silk. And fourth, a cooking pot. Hidesato did not feel the need for any of these gifts, but graciously accepted because the Dragon King insisted, and he couldn't properly refuse. The Dragon King himself followed Hidesato for quite some distance of the bridge, and when he bade him farewell, also gave the warrior more weapons and luxury items, his servants following Hidesato home to carry his many gifts. The warrior's family and servants were fraught with worry for him when he did not return home the previous night, and hoped he had found shelter from the hurricane. When his servants caught sight of him and told the others, his whole family came to greet him in relief. They were all curious about the king's footman, who followed him home with his rewards. And Hidesato recounted his awe-inspiring story. These offerings, which he obtained from the grateful Dragon King, were discovered to be magical items. Hidesato had no use for the bell, so he gave it to the village temple, and once it was hung, the whole village had longer daylight hours. The bag of rice never emptied, no matter how much was taken. The roll of silk was also inexhaustible, and an endless amount of clothing could be made from it. The cooking pot required no flame and made the most delicious food. The reputation of Hidesato's fortune spread far and wide. He had no want to invest in rice, silk, or fire sources. He became very wealthy and henceforth known as My Lord Bag of Rice. So that was a fun little story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And maybe I'll get some copyright usage things soon. I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you.